Ladies and gentlemen, go for our wild, wild ride with the Honey Badgers. But beware, the sweetest kittens have the sharpest claws. For your own safety, strap yourself in and hold onto something as we enter the Pussycat Cast. Taboo topics.
Wait a second. Men are human too.
Marginalized men. Uncomfortable truths.
Suck!
The Pussycats aren't afraid of heavy lifting.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Pussycat Cast number 8. It's a dangerous job, but somebody's got to do it. This week's Verbal Valkyries, well, actually, there's only one Verbal Valkyrie this week. That is, of course, our Polecat Punisher turned part-time Pussycat pugilist, Hannah, and myself, the clam in this? No, I'm the pickle. Whatever. Actually, in today's show, since Hannah's the one that's outnumbered, it's actually a pickle jar with one clam in it. So, welcome to the show. Now, normally the Pussycat Cast is a news show, but I wanted to do some special things this time. So, just to sort of get you guys acclimated to what we're doing today, today's episode of the Pussycat Cast will be a little bit different from the usual story hounding and lull farming that we do here at HBR. Last week we had a show that talked about men who serve in the military and brought some actual vets on to discuss their time there and their experiences within our modern warrior culture. Since the majority of people who serve and sacrifice themselves in the military happen to be men, we thought it would be a good relevant topic to discuss, and we didn't want to do it injustice by talking about it without having any experience ourselves. Before even going this route, I had actually originally was trying to get guests on who do dangerous and risky jobs, which are also male-dominated fields that most people take for granted. So to discuss dangerous jobs today, our guests are General Machinist, Mechanical Repair Technician, QA Jerk, and all-around metal worker and small engine mechanic Nick Boyle, and a journeyman roofer, third-year scaffolder, and second-year carpenter Mark, or you might know him as Marking Bad on YouTube. So welcome to the show, guys. How are you guys doing?
I'm doing right.
All right.
Still have all of my parts.
That's good. That's good. So I'll go ahead and I'll start with Nick. Nick, why did you end up taking these jobs that you did? Did you have an interest in them, or what were the conditions?
Not one bit, actually. I went to school to do fine arts, actually, when I was about 19, right? 1920. Mm-hmm. I did fine arts. I worked for a little comic company in Windsor, which I didn't realize at the time. Anyways, I quit there, and I got a job with my landlord, who had a machine shop just outside town. And that's where I started, because it paid the bills.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Uh-huh. So you actually didn't want to do this, but you just sort of, why did you stay? Like, if it wasn't something you were interested in?
I always kind of did machine shop in high school, and I thought, okay, well, I've had some experience. Sure, maybe I'll find some work in art somewhere else along the line, but right now I have to pay rent, that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I just started working there. I started cleaning dyes and getting cuts and cuts and cuts, but I started cleaning dyes there and slowly started to learn the trade as it.
All right. Well, we'll get into the gore soon enough. Marking Bad, what made you get into this sort of line of work? How do you end up finding yourself doing this stuff?
Mostly, I come from a rural background, so I've always kind of had to work to some extent. But I fell into roofing more or less accidentally, and just realized that honestly, I really enjoy working with my hands, and I call it getting paid to play with fire, break things, tan, and work out. The reason why I drifted away from that to scaffolding was actually that I've more or less done everything you can do as a roofer. If there's a roof out there, I can put it on. Yeah.
So it was just something that you just do that. It's just what you like doing. All right.
I provide one of the basics of civilization. I help provide shelter.
Absolutely. And this is the reason why I wanted to do this about this show, because this is something that people, it's like there are men that do jobs that we don't see what goes into it, but we do benefit from what comes of it. I remember, I can't remember his name now, but he's the guy who does the Dirty Jobs show. For some reason,
Mike Rowe.
just like Mike Rowe, right? He was talking about how people turn on a light switch, and then there's electricity. There's a light on inside. It's a miracle. It's something that when you think about all the things that are involved with like making that happen, or you take a shit and you flush the toilet and it's gone. It's gone and you never have to deal with it again. I mean, this is a miracle of technology, and at least people, I mean, people who live in big cities especially, but anybody anywhere that has access to these sort of modern conveniences, they don't realize how much goes into it and how much of it is maintained and kept up by men. And some of it is dangerous, and that's why I wanted to get some of you guys on. There were a couple of other guys that couldn't make it on the show, but I wanted to tell you what they did. One guy was a cattle rustler, and he worked with livestock, and apparently a very dangerous job. I figured it was hard work, but
one of my uncles, when he was a teenager, was trapped up in the upper part of a bull's stall for several hours because it got angry with him when he was taking care of it. They can be extremely dangerous. Getting hit by a bull is like getting hit by a car, except it has sharp things to impale you with and throw you too. And it has sharp hooves that it can stomp on you with, and you can get trampled to death. Mm-hmm. It's extremely dangerous. And that's just, they didn't have a lot of cattle. They just had a few cows and a few bulls, and that was a small farm. Yep. So I can imagine that working with a big herd would be extremely dangerous, even if you were not necessarily outside of a vehicle or down off of a horse and on your feet. Even if you had some degree of protection, you would still be in a dangerous situation.
Yeah.
I can absolutely confirm that. My grandparents had about 50 head of cattle, and there wasn't a lot of bulls available for stud, and so after a while, some of the animals were starting to get a little dumb from inbreeding, and we had a 2-year-old steer that had absolutely no interest in being nice to people, regardless of what equipment they were on, and he would repeatedly attempt to charge like the quads or the trucks, and he had to be put down because of it.
And that's one of the many problems that you get with raising animals. You also have the problem of there are diseases that can go through a herd really quickly that cause violent behavior or can cross over, especially with pigs. If you're raising pigs, they can get diseases and cross right over to the family. We're actually, humans and pigs aren't that different when it comes to our immune systems and what can affect us. So there's a lot of danger there.
Yeah.
Actually, if you ever want somebody to really garner some respect for, ask a rodeo clown about his job.
Oh, those are extremely dangerous jobs. Those are crazy. I mean, I've seen some footage of what rodeo clowns go to. I assume the money must be good, because that's the only thing I could think of. But yeah, so we've had some other guys. There was one guy. He worked with. He was a chemist, and he worked with extremely high temperature and extremely low temperature materials. And he also had some stories that he wanted to come on and talk about. Unfortunately, these guys couldn't make it. So we'll try to get them back on another time, and along with a couple of other people for a future show. But what we do have, we will work with. So first, I will ask Marking Bad, what do you do now, and what is the title, and how do you describe it? Like, basically, what does it entail? What you do?
Well, right now I'm a journeyman roofer with a small company, and I mean, I've got to be able to drive the truck. I've got to be able to do all the tasks that any other journeyman roofer would do. So I'm handling live torches that are between 75,000 and 120,000 BTU. If there's a tar kettle on site, you've got a pair of 120,000 BTU propane torches that are heating asphalt to 500 degrees. It's not something that's particularly pleasant to interact with directly. And I have to do this year round. So, I mean, once you get down to minus 25, it's really difficult to handle the material. It tends to be pretty fragile because of how cold it gets. But I mean, imagine 30 degrees Celsius, roughly 90 Fahrenheit, plus you got 500 to 525 degree Fahrenheit asphalt that you're mopping about, or you're playing with torches that are pumping out 800 degree heat. And you got to do that on a roof. You got to be able to lift anywhere between 50 to 100 pounds consistently.
Up a ladder.
Well, we're not supposed to carry things on ladders, but I mean, you are at heights. So on an average commercial building, you're between 2 and 4 stories tall. That assumes that you're not on like a commercial or industrial high rise. If you're on one of those, if you go to New York, some of those buildings are damn tall. And I'm not in a city that has anything more than usually 60 stories, but I mean, 60 stories up is a long ways. That you can actually feel the building swaying.
Really? No, yeah. I know that. Yeah, I know that's true though, because here in Chicago, we have guys that work up in the Willis Tower and Trump Tower, and
imagine being a window washer.
Downtown. Yeah, being a window washer up there, exactly. And the buildings do move. People who work in the offices can feel the buildings moving if they work in the upper levels.
My grandfather was a welder up there.
Oh, really?
If you go to New York, I don't know all of the ones he worked on, but if you go to New York, my grandfather helped build some of those buildings. And he was one of the guys that would go way up high and work up at the top.
Yeah, high steel.
Yep. Actually, if you go to Mexico, he built some buildings there too. So, and Colorado and Chicago. My grandfather was a welder. And I do not know the levels, the names for all of the levels, but he was at the best level you can be. Like there was no higher name for his standard of work aside from being underwater, which apparently, like, I don't know enough about welding to know the whole thing, but apparently doing it underwater is an entirely different ballgame. But
yeah, their life expectancy or career expectancy at least is 12 years, I think.
Yeah, that I did know, but
Seriously?
It's only 12 years because of the nitrogen poisoning that can occur. The constant going up and down the bends.
Yeah.
Okay, makes sense.
Oh, wow. So, marking, when you said you worked at a small roofing company. Is it your company, or are you just like...
No, I'm working for, I'm working for a guy that I used to work with at a different company about 5 years ago. I've only just gone back to roofing. I was a scaffolder for the last 4 years. I mean, I've been all over the Alberta oil fields, and I've worked on drag lines at one of the coal plants.
Oh, okay. So you were involved with the coal industry and the oil industry as well. Yep. Do you have? Well, you know what? We'll get into that. On what you currently do as a roofer, do you have a team? And
yeah, I'm actually a foreman, so I'm responsible I'm responsible for herding cats.
Right.
I have to make sure that other people are doing their jobs safely and correctly, and I also have to be, like I said, do all of the tasks associated with being a journeyman as well. So, I mean, I've got the additional stress of trying to mentor people while making sure that they're not falling off of things or burning themselves or cutting themselves.
Yeah. And what about you, Nick? What do you do, and how do you describe it?
Well, I was laid off at Christmas, but up until then, the last 2 years, I've been mechanical repairman. So we fix and maintain any sort of machinery, hand tools, power tools, pneumatic tools, air tools, lathes, mills, grinders, surface grinders, table saws, routers, planers.
Yeah.
Whatever we sold, we maintained and repaired. And that would include machining parts if required.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And did you work as part of a team as well, or is it sort of like
I mean, you can call it a team. There really wasn't any team players, but it was a team.
okay? All right. Back to marking. So with your team, and this is one of the things that Allison and I have both talked about before. Firstly, did your team have? Did you ever have days where you were understaffed and overworked, or was that
Oh,
relatively?
absolutely.
That was pretty common, like skeleton crews and stuff like that.
Just the stereotype of roofers is not a particularly positive one, no matter where you go. They tend to be, I mean, roofing companies need strong backs, weak minds, and warm bodies, generally speaking. So, I mean, regardless of where you go, you're going to end up with some percentage of people that are not necessarily employable otherwise.
High on drugs.
That tends to be a problem. There, a lot of I'm not certainly not saying it's that I know how many roofers tend to be former criminals or ex-convicts, but I've worked with no shortage of them.
Mm-hmm.
And so these people may or may not have dependency issues or substance abuse issues or very, very difficult home lives that keep them away from work. But yeah, I've had no shortage of times where I've had to figure out what I'm going to do for a day because I'm down 2 bodies or something.
Did you have any? I know you said that there's no shortage of ex-cons. Did you guys have any vets too, or ex-military or anything like that?
Worked with a couple. I mean,
Yeah.
And that's the thing is roofing is such an ugly, nasty, physically demanding job that in Western Canada, about 5 or 6 years ago, almost all of the roofing companies in the prairies were actively pursuing temporary foreign workers. We were bringing over staff from the UK, from Germany, from Poland. We got one fellow that was a Filipino who had been working in the Middle East for the last 20 years. And we were desperate for bodies.
All right. Okay. Well, so did you guys have so considering all of that, what would you say were the standards in terms of workplace safety where you worked? And this is for both of you guys, but I'll let Marking answer first.
Depending on what environment it's in, they can vary from absolutely none in residential to you probably have to do paperwork until coffee break if you're in an industrial area. Like I've been to the oil field as both a roofer and a scaffolder, and you're doing paperwork until coffee break. Your first coffee break, you sit down, you finish signing up your paperwork, and then after coffee, you actually go to work.
That makes sense. I guess I can see that.
Well, I mean, when you're in an environment where the explosive potential of the plant around you is very high, and you're dealing with stuff like hydrogen fluoride or hydrogen sulfide, which kills you in under 3 breaths. I mean, you've got to be really aware of what you're doing, and you've got to be especially aware of open flames.
Yeah. All right. Well, let me send this question over to Nick too. The one about safety, because the reason why I'm pointing this out is because, like I said, this is something we talked about before. If these jobs are mostly done by men, one would wonder, how much we invest in the safety of men when they're doing these jobs. Now, of course, the reasons why men hurt themselves in the job are not purely because there isn't enough safety. There's obviously other factors, but this was something that we were asking about. So, Nick, what do the standards for safety for the kind of work you did? What was it like?
Well, as a machinist, I mean, there are some rules. There are some basic rules that you should follow, and they always have signs. They always have signs up, but that doesn't mean anything. There are some rules that we all know that half of them don't follow. No rings, no gloves, no long sleeves, no long hair, no hanging clothes, glasses on all the time. And yet, I can't count the times that I've seen machinists lose bits of their fingers or their fingers. Break their teeth because of things going flying. Take the chuck key out of the chuck. And yet, boom! I've seen chucks go flying. I've seen chuck keys hit people. And the thing is you're in an environment where it's always go, 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 and then go a little more.
When you say go, do you mean like there's pressure to work fast or get?
Always.
There's like a
Always.
timeline. Okay.
It is always a go, go, go. There is no stop. Time is money. When they're charging the customer, $1,500 to $3,000 an hour to run some of these CNCs.
Mm-hmm. So do you know when they these places where they quote them? Because I used to work with contractors that do like drywall, painting, that kind of thing. And when contractors would give an estimate to their clients, they would not charge by the hour; they would charge by the job.
Yeah.
Because I mean, obviously, if you're a smart person, you're not going to allow someone to charge you by the hour, because then they're going to take however long it takes, and it's going to kill you. So you make them charge you by the job. However, what that means is the guy is going to try and get the job done as fast as possible, so that he doesn't lose any money.
You see, a lot of the big shops. Okay, there's a lot of in Ottawa. There's a lot of government machine shops that only do military contracting. I've worked at a few of those. They charge the big bucks, and they charge them by the hour. Mm-hmm. I've worked at a lot of custom prototype shops as well. They will charge by the job. They're just small job shops. They charge by the hour. But it's the big shops, the big production, commercial shops. Those are the ones where I've seen the real injuries. Those are the ones where I've seen the real pressure. Yeah, the smaller shops. I mean, I've seen some dumb injuries, but nothing like I've seen in the big shops.
Okay.
Nothing even close.
All right. Well, let's find out what kind of stuff we're dealing with here. So I'm going to go back to marking, and Hannah, if you want to ask a question or jump in, go right ahead. I'm not, whenever you want to say something. So.
Well, I can point out one thing, that issue you brought up of the by the job payment and stuff like that actually affects a lot of dangerous jobs. And one of the first ones that came to mind for me was trucking, because there's a lot of truckers in my family, and a lot of times they get paid by the mile. So how fast they go makes a difference, and whether they stop for their required amount of rest makes a difference too, because they're getting paid less per hour if they're getting paid by the mile and they take more time to do the job. And the other thing is they're under pressure by both the companies they're delivering for, and a lot of times the companies they work for, which aren't always the same as the company they're delivering for, to get there faster. And there's had to be laws passed to mandate how long they're allowed to drive before they have to rest, and how long they have to rest before they're allowed to get back on the road again. And that's partly because the truckers themselves will work that hard. And it's partly because these companies will force them to drive cross country without any rest and without, anything but little pit stops here and there. And so, it's a problem in various industries. Even like most people that have worked in retail have experienced this. It's not nearly as dangerous in retail, but it's the same behavior. It's the same behavior you see in factories. It is like they don't really value the safety of the employee as much as they value the dollar that they're getting.
We'd have to look no further than Jack Barnes or Magnus Deacon, both people I know that are truckers. I mean, they both put on a lot of miles, and I mean, they did a movie back in, what was it, the early 90s, The Black Dog. Kurt Russell he drove too long, was too sleep deprived, saw the black dog, rushed the truck, and took out a car full of a family. That's stuff that happens.
Yep.
Yeah. You say the black dog, do you mean like the weird illusions that appear down the road when you're driving for long periods of time?
You're driving for long periods of time, and all you see is blacktop, and you're starting to get sleep deprived? Yeah,
that happened to me when I was driving cross country. I didn't hit anything, but I did see that, and I was like, what the fuck? I need to pull over.
Yeah, I used to get that when I used to drive 2 counties away to teach in a university after working all day in a retail shift, and I would be driving home, where I was 20 hours after I had gotten up in the morning after working my shift, going home, gathering my kid, taking him to my parents' house, going out to teach, getting my kid again and starting home again. And I'd hit that. I'd see somebody crossing the highway, and I'm going, there isn't anybody crossing the highway. There can't be anybody crossing the highway. It's the highway. Nobody does that. And I'd get up closer, and it would have just been a shadow.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I've had the same thing at the one shop where I've seen the most. I'll call it the Gore Factory. The same thing. I switched to the weekend shift. We did 3/14s, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and we got the week off. But the one night, I was setting up my machine, and as I'm cranking, and I'm listening to the machine, and on any other day, I would have realized that I'm pushing the machine just a little too hard. I'm hearing it squeal. I'm hearing the hydraulics start to crank, and I'm hearing the metal just squish, and it's not processing. And then, bang, dies go flying, the machine goes, and I pissed myself. I went outside and had a smoke. But because of things like that, this pushing us, this 14-hour shifts, which we all signed. We had to sign this form that allowed us to work more than 8 hours, more than our amount of time. I guess it was a liability thing, but yeah, I almost put a big chunk of metal into my head. I sort of broke the machine. I broke a bunch of dies, like probably $10,000 worth of dies and fixtures, because of just working. And this was weeks and weeks on end, because it wasn't just before like the weekend. I would come in Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, because I mean they were allowing the overtime, and they said, "You want to work? We got the work." And I said, "Fuck it, sure." But yeah.
Yeah.
One of many exploding things.
Oh, sure.
But that's I think that's the same thing. When you push people too much, you push them, you kind of push them past, I think, what they should safely be doing. The job itself was, I mean, as risky as it always was, but I don't know what happened. I don't know what happened when I see other people at the same job doing the same thing, because it wasn't just me who blew things up. It was all sorts of guys after the same amount of time that we would put in. I mean, it was a weekly thing that there were things blowing up, that people were ducking and covering.
Shit.
And no one cared. So that specific machine had the safeties broken. There was a tonnage safety, and it didn't work. It was supposed to chime, and it was supposed to lock you out once you reached a certain tonnage, but it didn't work. So we were just supposed to watch. We were supposed to watch the controller, and I didn't watch. I was just used to listening. But yeah.
Okay, well.
Let me give you another example of fatigue. I knew a guy that did maintenance sprinkler fitting. And in maintenance sprinkler fitting, especially in Canada, there's this magic number they have, minus 27 Celsius. Minus 27 Celsius, the doors of foyers freeze open, and the bulb for the sprinkler system will shatter in the cold. And so during the winter, maintenance sprinkler fitters are working crazy hours. And all of the companies in the city I live in, if you want to work as a maintenance sprinkler fitter, you have to sign an agreement that says for your on-call week, if you are not on a call, you will take the call that comes in, which literally means you can be up for 72 plus hours. And this guy, he had to sign a waiver that said he was willing to do that. And the reason he got run out of the industry was because he pointed out that, I mean, we reasonably consider fatigue to be a debilitating condition. I mean, you can be arrested for driving while intoxicated or driving while impaired for fatigue. And he had 2 fender benders in the space of 6 months because he'd been up for, in the one case, it was 45 hours straight. And this is stuff that just gets signed off on.
Yeah.
These are exemptions to labor code through signing a private contract.
Wow. So
And sprinkler systems are pressurized systems. They have hydraulic pressure in them. They can kill you.
oh yeah,
Yeah.
I bet. So let's hear about some stuff that's actually happened on the job. I'm gonna start with marking bad, and let's see. According to this, you said before you were a roofer, you were a scaffolder. Is there anything there that you can tell us about?
Yeah, I wasn't present for it, but while I was, I'd actually had a rough winter one year, and I was working in a trailer manufacturing shop, and I worked with a guy who had been a scaffolder. He fell 192 feet and pretty much hit every member of a scaffold. He kicked himself in the head 3 times, in the back of the head with his heels, and broke his
Oh.
spine. And he survived. And 18 months later, he was working with me.
Really?
Yeah, he somehow had been. Apparently, the angels were watching because he managed to survive that. And 18 months later, he was capable of walking around and doing basic construction tasks.
So this guy, just to reiterate, he fell from a scaffold 192 feet, hit every part of it on the way down, to the point where his body twisted to the point where he was kicking the back of his own head with the heels of his feet. Then
Yep.
he was in traction, I assume, in the hospital, and in you said, what you say, 18 months?
It was 18 or 22 months. It's been almost 15 years since I worked with the guy.
So something like between 18 and 20 months, so basically a couple of years, he was working with you again. Now, was he, I'm assuming he wasn't the same, like he wasn't able to do the stuff he was able to do before?
No,
or-
no, he did not go back scaffolding. He was working as an apprentice carpenter at a trailer building shop at that point when I met him. I want to say it's last summer or the summer before. I worked at a fertilizer plant northeast of where I live, and then immediately after I left there, they had a fatality, and it was actually amongst the laborers. But they had a hopper system that had plugged, and so this guy was trying to fiddle with it. And I mean, this is, like I said, after I left that plant. I'd actually been there 4 different times for various shutdowns they've had. This guy fell into the hopper, was submerged in material that this plant produces, and during the rescue attempt, he was decapitated by a loader.
Holy shit, man! Wait, what's the material that he was submerged in? Do you know what it was?
It was some kind of fertilizer end product. I'm not sure, but he was gonna suffocate to death.
Yeah, right. So he was drowning in something, and then they went to
They attempted to dig him out using the loader,
yeah.
and they decapitated him.
Whew. Holy shit.
At that plant in particular, I've during a shutdown of their acid unit, I was in flushed acid tanks under not normal supplied air, but I was using assisted air, which, I mean, you've got to wear a full body heavy rubber suit, and you've got a belt pack that is basically a fan that powers air into your hood. And I mean, these are vessels that range anywhere from somewhere around 10%, I'm trying to remember what it is, sulfuric acid, all the way up to 75 to 80% sulfuric acid. This will
Eat your skin.
Even at 10%, I mean,
Yeah.
this stuff will damage you severely and rapidly.
When stuff like this happens, so this guy got decapitated by a loader, is there like some kind of, I don't know, like consequence to the
OH&S
anything,
was
or
occupational health and safety was all over them, and I don't know what the results were. I don't even know if the case is complete. And this is only, I think it's 2 years ago. It might I'm pretty sure it's 2 years ago. And I mean, there's no end of stories about various oil field plants in the prairies having massive explosions. I actually I live within the blast radius of one set of refinery plants in my city.
so
and
you
we're
mean
talking,
if this refinery were to blow up, you would get caught in the explosion like Terminator 2?
I'm at the edge of the explosion radius.
Yeah.
I'm like, and we're talking probably a good 3 miles by the as the crow flies. And these are the environments that people go into to work. And the vast majority of them, I'll be honest, in industrial plant environments, the vast majority of staff are men. And the very few staff that tend to be women will tend to be in clean trades or associated with something in the office.
Like
I mean,
they do administrative type work and
a lot. I've seen a lot of women in safety, electricians.
Mhm.
Those tend to be the two. I mean, I'm not saying there's no women in scaffolding or in pipe fitting. They're a decided minority.
Yeah, right.
And go so far as to say a rarity.
Yeah, scaffolding actually seems to have a reasonable number, in my experience, but they are almost universally farm women.
That makes sense. That actually makes a lot of sense, especially, if they were smaller family farms and stuff like that, and not the bigger corporate farms, because a lot of times they end up doing a lot more manual labor because there's stuff they can't afford to get that would do the labor for them, and they run the machine instead. And my parents both grew up with either farming parents or farming grandparents, and had those experiences.
I wonder now that you're talking about all these fires and stuff. I wonder how many people died in Fort Mac last year. How many of them were men and trying to I don't know, stop the fire or get people out or whatever it was.
I'm not sure. As far as I know, there were no fatalities amongst the firefighters, but I don't quote me on that. I haven't looked at it in quite a while.
Okay, I was just curious. Hannah, I'm sorry, were you still talking? I didn't mean to jump on you there.
Oh no, I just forgot to mute.
Oh, okay.
No, you mentioned fire and firefighters. The one good thing in that job is that there's been a lot of advances in safety equipment. I think that there's been a great deal of advance in breathing equipment and so on over the last 50 100 years that it's not like a safe job. I wouldn't say it's a safe job, but there's a great deal that's changed between the way it was done in the past and the way it is now. And so it's a lot of times now, especially with the changes in building materials and how flammable, or not building materials, but the things that are in your building, like your furniture and stuff. When you hear about deaths in a fire, a lot of times it's because the stuff inside the building burned really fast, and the people in the building were asphyxiated, not as often because firefighters went inside and tried to rescue them. And it's not good for people that's happened, but it's good for firefighters, obviously, that their equipment is better, their safety equipment, their personal protective equipment, and so on has really advanced.
Yeah. Nick, actually, let me go to you. Same question. So, let's see. You say you've done mechanical repair. You were a machinist and metal worker and engine mechanic. So, how about machinist jobs? I bet those are nice and bloody. Tell me about some stories about that.
For the most part, machining, it really is just a lot of cut, missing fingers.
Okay.
But some of the goriest stuff happened when I was at the sheet metal shop.
Oh, really?
Place where I almost blew myself up. So I was working there as a tool maker. I worked there fixing punches and dies in the tool room. And occasionally, at some point, I got into programming some of these press brakes, the CNC press brakes for forming sheet metal. And in that time, I guess I can't count how many times I saw people squish their fingers.
Whoa!
Squish them flat.
Squish them. Oh God! Wait. Well, how does that happen? Like, what is it that does that?
Here's the thing. I don't know. Okay, there's a stop cycle. So as you're pushing the pedal down, so after somebody's come and set it up, so you've got to hold. You hold the sheet in between the dies, and people will hold their fingers too close. Okay, I personally got to pinch my fingers in between the dies. You let off the pedal, and the machine stops. That's it. So I've always wondered how they managed to do it, but I've watched them continually. They just keep pressing it, and I think to myself, what the hell are you doing? But I want to know at what point they get past the pain of squeezing their fingers.
Yeah.
But I've seen maybe 10 fingers squeezed, a couple broken off. The worst is, so we had this guy, his name was Death. Yes, Death. He was a little Filipino guy.
Wait, Death?
So,
Like the Grim
Death.
Reaper? Okay.
D-E-T-H, Death.
D-E-T-H. That's
Now, I'm sure-
that's the most metal Filipino name I've ever heard. But okay, but go ahead.
He was kind of a scrawny little guy. So we've taken him from one of the other departments. A lot of the times we could just take them and put them on, we set the machine up, we give them little parts, and they do their thing. Well, this Deaf guy, he comes over, and he's been over a few times, so we had a little faith in him. Unfortunately, Death changed the fucking game. He changed it. He changed the system. At the time, there was no safety rails. Like these rails they put on the side, they're the laser brakes. You have to work in these like laser cages. If you stick your hands in the laser, the machine shuts down immediately, and you have to reset it. So this was before this happened, and this guy caused it. He cut his hand off.
Whoa.
The whole hand off. And this was the problem with these, is because the way you had to set up some of these parts, they wouldn't let these new guys use any of the really big machines. We had two 300-ton press brakes in the back. They would have easily handled this work without having to reach in behind it. Mm-hmm. Reach in behind it and pull it one way or pull it another way. Well, Death got his hand stuck by reaching around, because sometimes you have to stand aside and reach in and kind of pull it up, help it up, because the pieces were so big. Well, Death got his hand cut. And again, I say, how does this happen? Nobody heard him scream. Nobody heard anything. All we heard was bang, because the die broke, which makes me wonder, who set this thing up? Because after he ended up taking the business to court, and he sued everybody. He sued my supervisor. He sued. I was lead hand, so he sued the other lead hand, and he got nothing. He got nothing. But that changed everything.
And he didn't. You say he didn't scream, or is it just one of those? Once I lost a tip of my finger putting it in a machine when I was 7 years old, and the reason why I didn't scream was because I didn't realize what had happened, and it took some time for me to actually look at what I did to myself, to realize, and then the pain came. Was as weird as that sounds.
No, I understand. I have a big. You probably can't see it, but there's a big scar here where I stuck a piece of metal into my hand, just into my hand, through the bone, poked out the other side, because I was in a hurry, and it was my own stupidity. But somebody set this machine up, and they sort of disregarded all the. That's crazy. They set it up so that they disregarded all of our. There was set up protocols. So when the machine was coming down, it had to stop and then go slow. So that would come down to a point and then come. But that didn't happen. Mm-hmm. And I think because it was so big, because they didn't use the bigger machine, it was so big, they had to have it come down fast in order to catch it, so that he was holding this. Because this was a 1/4-inch stainless. It was a big piece of 1/4-inch stainless. So it's big, it's heavy, it's awkward, and had they followed the safety protocols, this wouldn't have happened. It wouldn't have happened at all.
Yeah. Are there
penalties?
Are there penalties for guys who don't obey the safety protocols outside of the obvious loss of limb?
No.
Okay.
Depending on where you are, there can be, though.
Yeah, hold on. Absolutely. In this shop, at that time, there was none. There was absolutely none. This was the gore factory. people were blowing things up all the time because they were disregarding the protocols. They were disregarding tonnage protocols. They were disregarding safety protocols. And at some point, we all ended up getting laid off.
Could that also maybe be in part because they're not very well trained? I don't know. Was there a high turnover there? I assume if people are blowing shit up and losing limbs, they're probably not working there much longer, and they have to bring in new people all the time.
So I worked there from 2003 to 2008. I worked specifically in the tool room and the machine shop, but because of my experience, I was in the brake department. That company at some point laid off about 3/4 of his employees, and they regularly hire a bunch of people for the summers. They might keep 2 or 3 on and lay them off. They hire a bunch, they lay them off. It's all contract. All the time.
I see.
Now it's contract. Everything is contract there. But when I went back 2.5 years ago, I went back for about 3 months before I got laid off again. And this is where I saw the outcome of death's injury was everything. Everything had these laser gates on them. Some of the machines actually had robots at them. Yeah, robots. That's what they're giving the jobs away to, robots.
So
that's kind of what happened when my uncle was injured at a rubber processing plant. He got his hand caught in a rubber press. Rubber press would take a big bulk piece of metal and flatten it out to a 1/2 inch thick. And it rolled his hand through the press all the way up to his elbow because the safety switch to turn it off was not within the reach of the person operating the press. He had to yell for another guy to turn that off. And the other guy was frozen with panic at seeing what was happening to him. So he stood there and let it continue to go until my uncle threatened to kill him. This is the same uncle, by the way, that got almost gored by the bull and got trapped up next to the rafters of the barn roof. And it took it all the way up to his elbow, and then they had to roll it back out. And he, in his lawsuit, he got almost nothing as well. He got his medical bills paid for, but he didn't get a bunch of money, even though the safety switch was not within his reach, because the law at that time, the law didn't protect him. It didn't have a requirement for there to be a safety switch within his reach. There just had to be one. And the law got changed, actually, because of that in that state. And but he was disabled after that, as far as because he couldn't use that arm for anything. They did an experimental surgery on him. They put metal in place of his bones, and he actually couldn't lift anything heavy because they used aluminum first. And if he lifted anything too heavy, it would bend the metal. There are changes that take place. But the thing is, if you think about the safety stuff, all right, there are industries in which failing to follow safety protocols can carry the death penalty by way of logic. You screw this up, you can get killed doing it. You can go over the edge of the boat if you stick your foot in the coils and fall into the water and drown, or get your leg torn off. Mm-hmm. End up under crab fishermen. It can end up actually under the cage, which is a huge metal cage. So there's where the failure to follow that can carry such terrible penalty if they're not following it because of that. And the threat of paying a fine isn't going to be much of a deterrent either.
Every single year of both apprenticeships I've been in, we've had specific portions of the course focus on OSHA. And every single year, we have literally been told that every single page, every single rule in an OSHA handbook is literally written in blood. Every one of those rules they have is there because somebody has bled.
Yeah, see that? That's interesting because I found out later that there were these pedals for the machines at the specific sheet metal shop. that all you had to do was press a little harder on them to snap them down. Now they cost about $1,500 extra, but that could have stopped everything. There's a safety stop on the controller, which is completely out of reach. The safety stop is on the other side, and just the way these machines are made, I think they didn't want to spend the money at the time.
Well, that's overhead that eats into the bottom line.
That is. You have 20-some press brakes with
$1,000 controllers instead of the $2,500 controllers.
That's right. Well, I mean, again, these are the pedals that could have stopped. They're the safety pedals, like the extra press. Actually, I had a supervisor who had. There was another one that we had at that same shop where it was backwards. It didn't come down. Everything went up, and he ended up blowing up a die, and it went through his arm and straight through his ribs and into his heart. He didn't get anything from that company. He didn't get anything. Yeah, I think everybody there at some point has had to duck and cover because the lax safety standards.
Yeah.
And then a lot of times companies are not held responsible when they fail at safety standards. And I know several people that have been put on the job. I've had a workers' comp eligible heat injury myself.
Mm.
And what these big companies like to do is they just keep appealing until they get somebody who reduces your payment, or until something happens to keep you from making the hearing and then they refuse to reschedule, or some other thing comes along and they can get out of it. And quite frequently there will be something, and then the company doesn't end up having to compensate the employee. So like you hear about these big settlements that this employee or that employee got for some seemingly minor injury. That's a rarity in comparison to the number of people who get hurt on the job and walk away not just the worse for wear physically, but also financially.
Mm-hmm. Well, in that, when I first moved to Ottawa, I started off at a little composite shop. The process. So after I'd made the dies, you have to actually. We had to mix the carbon composite. It was like carbon fiber. There's a lot of carbon fibers and bats and sticks and things. You actually have to mix it together. I ended up getting chemical burn all up my arms because of the process. Really, you just put gloves on, you stuck your drill in with the sort of an auger thing, and you spun it around until it was mixed. But it would splash. It would splash up your neck. It would splash in your gloves, absorb into your shirt. And they didn't have anything. They gave you a little mask. They gave you your glasses and rubber gloves that went up to your elbows. But
Jesus.
as I found out, I was not the first nor the 10th person to file for workers' compensation for that exact thing from this same company. It was a regular thing. And I had to quit. I mean, it was like I'd been in insulation. Like I just slept in insulation, and it was burning. It had blistered, and it wasn't the carbon. It was this catalyst material. And the life of me, I can't remember the name of this material.
Yeah, I was gonna say, if you give me the name, I can look it up, find out what the hell was in it.
Yeah.
But well, actually, maybe you can look it up for me if you got a second. I want to ask marking and some of the other stuff that happened on his jobs.
There was a day that I was working west of the city, and we were working. Actually, it was intended to become an insulation plant, and out front of the building, we had a lineman fall off of a power pole while he was setting up the power, fell into a pile of sand. That day, we happened to be craning insulation onto the roof. We had insulation blow out of the slings twice. And then we got a call from the shop telling us to shut down because we had a man down off of another job. We had speaking of Nick's complaints about people putting pressure on, this foreman had he hadn't set up his hoist yet on the job, and they were attempting to lift a power spreader up, and so they set up the hoist, and they failed to put in one of the critical pins for the lowest cross member. They didn't have enough weight on the back, and so they had not just some of their weights, but they also had roofing material and a guy standing on the back. This stabilizer bar, while they were attempting to lift about a 500-pound power spreading unit, popped out, the back end kicked out. The guy standing on the back fell off. The weights went the other way. The hoist started to go up, and the guy operating it was caught in the hydraulic lines, and he did his best impression of a lawn dart.
Oh.
He went down almost 2.5 stories, and he landed a foot away. None of the parking lot for this construction project was great. It was at base grade, so there was no asphalt. If there'd been asphalt, he probably would have died. So he landed head first about a foot away from a manhole cover and about 18 inches away from a 2x6 surveying post. And he hit basically head first. He hit so hard his body snapped over, and his pelvis landed so hard it broke in 7 places.
Oh, fuck.
They put 22 holes in his skull that night. He survived. He works with the safety department at that company now.
Jesus Christ, dude. Were you there for that?
I was not present for that. But
that was something that happened when you were where you were and you got called out from that happened.
We were told to shut down because we had a massive incident.
Yeah.
Another situation was, and it's not a company I worked for a long time, but I worked with the foreman that he was later a supervisor of mine. He was the lead hand on a job in a small military town about 4 hours from me, and they were working on a school there. And unbeknownst to anybody, the electrical that was run through the Q decking, which is corrugated metal decking that they use for a substrate for roofs, well, they'd run all of their electrical conduit in the flues, which is not unusual. But there was somewhere in the roof a break in the conduit, and it exposed a piece of wire which was sparking, and it caught the insulation on fire. Of course, because there's roofers on the building, the automatic presumption is that the roofers have done something to cause the fire. I mean, you've got hot tar, you've got open torches, open flames. It's usually not a huge leap of logic.
Right.
The foreman responsible, they were sitting in the bar at the end of the day. They watched the school burn down. The foreman responsible for the job dropped dead of a heart attack from the stress 2 weeks later. And the guy that was eventually my later supervisor, the province took him to court, and they were going to take his house.
Mm-hmm. Jesus.
While I was working in that same town on a later job, we were trying to pump out the last bit of the kettle. And I mean, if you don't know what a tar kettle is, it's some kind of large device which has chimneys that are run through the asphalt, and you put torches in one end, there's chimneys at another spot, and basically you're heating it with propane flames. And we had about 3 inches left in the bottom, and the thermometer sits about a foot up from that. So you can't use the thermometer. The thermometer, all it does at that point is registers air temperature.
Yeah.
So you have no idea what temperature the actual asphalt is at. So the process is you open the lid and you spit in it. You spit in it and it sizzles, it's not hot enough. If it cooks off immediately, it's hot enough. If when you open the lid, flames shoot down your sleeve and give you second-degree burns, it's too hot.
Right.
So I got second-degree burns on my left forearm. I spent 10 hours that day walking over to a 45-gallon drum of water that the bricklayers had and dunking my entire arm in the barrel, because by the end of the day, the entire inside of my left forearm was completely blistered.
Oh, shit. So, wait, you say 10 hours? You mean like the?
I worked at that was maybe 8:30 in the morning, and we worked until just after 6 that day.
Yeah. And you were...
How much longer do you want me to go on with weird stories?
No. Give me another one. Give me another one. These are great. And then I'll go back to Nick.
Same company, same foreman. I was working on a residential apartment structure, and we had a guy that was relatively new, and for reasons that escape me, he picked up a piece of rigid insulation, and he stood it in front of him while he was kneeling on one knee, and he was attempting to cut down it with a knife. So imagine you've got a piece of drywall or a piece of paper held in front of you, and you're trying to cut downwards with a knife.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so this is going.
Yeah, he put the knife down his forearm,
Oh, Jesus.
I was the only person with a cell phone, so I was calling 911. He had his hand clamped, like he walked over to the foreman, and he said, "I think I did something wrong," and he started to lift up his hand, and there was an immediate arterial shoot. So he clamped his hand shut. The foreman pretty much lost his lunch almost on top of the guy. I had to go up about 32 feet of ladder, and I had to come down the ladder with this guy's ass against my chest because he had his hand clamped to his forearm. He could not come down the ladder. We had no other way to get him down. So I literally was his means to get down.
Mm-hmm. And this guy effectively slit his wrists, like in the way that you're supposed to when you're trying to commit, like down the street.
He did come back a couple of weeks later. The company found a reason to lay him off, but I mean, he did survive. Yeah. Oh, they do. I was working out of town, about 4.5 hours northwest of where I live. And we had and this speaks to that fatigue thing. We'd already worked a 10-hour day, and it was a particularly unique roof process. It was mop down rubber, where there's you got a rubber sheet with a fleece material that's bonded to the bottom, and you mop out tar and you roll this out. And we'd done none of our detail work, so we'd not sealed any edges. We'd not ensured that the curbs were sealed up against water. The inspector for this job shows up, and he says, "Are you guys going to get this sealed? Because it's supposed to rain tonight." And the foreman looks at him like, "What?" And the guy, this is very early in the phones having data plans. The guy pulled up the weather report on his phone. It's like, yeah, there's like a big storm coming. The foreman looked at us and says, "You guys have a half an hour at the hotel. We're coming back." We worked 22.5 hours to get it sealed.
Oh, fuck. That sounds like a long day. How would you say the standards of things like, well, let's put it this way. In the cases where there were these sorts of accidents and injuries that you've either heard of or you witnessed or were involved in, what do you think is some of the biggest reasons for it? Is it bad training? Is it low safety standards? Is it just really stupid decisions? What do you think it is, Mark?
It's hard to pin it down across all of the things I've ever heard or seen as a roofer. A lot of times it's inattention. It's a risk tolerance, where if you've got a guy that you know and you trust, it's an older hand. If you always see him do something this way, or he tells you that this is the way it's always been done, that may or may not necessarily be the safest way. It's just he's gotten lucky 1,000 times already, or 10,000 times, or whatever. I mean, when I was out on my grandparents' farm haying, I jumped over a live power takeoff, and we can ask Nick what happens when you put your limbs near rotating things. What nobody had told me before was I had a shirt-tail relation. He ripped his shirt on another farm a couple of years before. His sleeve was pulled into the power takeoff. It ripped his arm off.
Jesus.
Yep.
I mean,
actually, speaking of that specifically, so at this place I was working, this little machinery repair, they had almost no safety. And I continually told the guys, listen, we had to turn the tool armatures. So on electric motors, they have an armature. And when they get worn, you put them on a lathe and you turn them down. Well, we had this one guy who didn't ever want to get his hands dirty. I don't know why he was working there, but he always wore gloves, these nitrile gloves. And I had told this guy, listen, of the rules that you need to know, one major rule while operating a lathe or any rotating machinery is no gloves, no rings, no necklaces. And yet he didn't listen. He didn't listen, wouldn't listen. He's been doing this forever. Well, maybe 2 months, 3 months at most, after telling him and kind of getting into it with him, because I was the new guy, so what the fuck did I know?
Mm-hmm.
He got his glove caught in the lathe while filing. And what happened? Same thing. Off with the tip of his finger. Maybe not the whole finger, but a big chunk of the skin under his finger.
Oh.
Gone. And because, and I mean, I think a lot of the times when it comes to lathe work and machine work, it's arrogance. It's arrogance.
Yeah.
I think you are, I think specifically what this guy said was, I've done 1,000 of these. I've had 1,000 of these. I know what I'm doing. Okay, you still don't wear gloves. You still wear gloves. You wouldn't operate this without your glasses. Why would you wear gloves? When you know, you just don't do it.
Right.
But yeah, I had told them. I had told the boss, the repair manager, and I told him, and he said, "Well, we can't just put signs up everywhere." Yeah. We couldn't put signs up. No, we expect them to use common sense. He's like, if you want to tell them, you tell them. Okay, well, I told them, and they didn't listen. And now you have to pay for some days off because you got injured at work. Mm-hmm. Don't tell me I didn't say anything.
Right.
Yeah.
That's brutal, man. Mark, you're back.
Yep.
Well, I was okay. So I was asking. You were telling me about. You said it's it's a little difficult to pin down. Maybe a consistent issue, but you did say something that I thought was really interesting: risk assessment. And we do know that testosterone it does cause men to take more risks. It is like one of the reasons why we do. It's hard to determine whether or not that. I mean, obviously, taking risks is not necessarily always a good thing because there is the downside of that. But I think that might be one of the reasons why they take the jobs too, because I'm not really sure. Like, if you try to do the job of a roofer, a scaffolder, a metal worker, a machinist, Alaskan fisherman, I don't think there's any way you can do those jobs and not take any risks at all, and be
It's
decent
really
at it. Yeah.
I mean, and I'll be honest. My father's absolutely petrified of heights, and I am scared shitless of falling. So, I mean, me being a scaffolder was taking me way outside of my comfort zone when I started doing it. And yet, not even 5 months ago, I was sat 90 feet in the air on a 6-inch, like literally sitting on a 6-inch beam, tearing apart a scaffold that was hung in the air.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you have to be willing to take some risks. And I mean, evolutionarily, if you could take a risk and you could get a big payoff, well, guess what? You look like a pretty good provider suddenly. So if you could jump out of a tree and land on a bear's back and break it, well, yeah, you took a risk, but it paid.
Yeah. And it seems like a lot of the guys you come in contact with that have some really fucked up shit happen to them all survive. So, and that's amazing, except for the guy who got decapitated by a loader.
Yeah. I don't believe I'd ever met the person, but I mean, he was, as I understand it, he was a fairly young man.
Oh, that's a shame.
He was in his 20s.
Mm-hmm. So, is the money worth it? Do you think the money's good enough?
I think so. I mean, certainly in the scaffolding, it's definitely worth it. Like I said, I mean, that's part of why I went scaffolding was I wanted to challenge myself.
Yeah.
Yeah, the money's all right. It's better if you do CNC work, which is mind-numbing, but CNC work is 10 times better for the money. Less challenging, but more money. Mm-hmm. And safer. A whole lot safer. If anything goes flying, if anything breaks, if anything blows up, if the tools explode, if the metal breaks, if anything happens, it's all contained inside the machine. If you're doing conventional work, there's usually a little plexiglass cover that you can see, but
yeah,
when tools break, that stops the most impact. But you're still getting hit by flying metal. You're still getting hit by flying parts. Yeah. The money's worth it, but
it does come with the risk.
It does.
I mean, Brian, if you want to share it, I can pull up that image that I showed you off air.
I can totally do that. You could Maybe send me a link to it.
If you've got a way to.
Oh no, I'm sharing the screen right now.
Yeah, there you go.
So people can see it. Yeah.
So this is a guy, and I don't know if this is the guy that actually took the chunk of grinder disc to the glasses, but that's showing you what happens when shit blows up, and that's a very small scale sort of thing. Like, we're not talking about what Nick's talking about, where you've got chunks of metal that would have moved like a bullet, but it's fairly small. You've got a part of a die moving like a bullet, that's going to blow right through you if you're lucky.
If I know, yeah, this is a perfect example of why you wear your glasses all the time, always. I don't know how to share images, but if you just Google lathe accident, it's not even hidden. You don't have to go any special settings. It is disgusting. But you will see what happens when you wear, and if you look closely, you'll see his sleeves and his shop coat right there in the mess.
Yep. What's left of him is pretty much the fabric he was wearing.
He is, and this looks like a gap bed, so it's you can extend the lid, but that chuck is look at that. Yeah, that's disgusting. That is absolutely disgusting. I'm not sure. I don't know how to share it, but
probably best we don't, to be honest.
Yeah, we don't want anything too gruesome up here. So.
No, that would definitely get us a strike.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, that's why I selected the image I did.
Not so bad. A couple of missing fingers. But yeah, I just say look for lathe accidents. Just pictures. You know, if you need to see the videos, and you will find an assortment of horribly, horribly disgusting pictures right there in Google Images. Oh yeah. And this is what happens when you don't follow the basic rules of running a lathe, running rotating machinery.
Well, there's something else I wanted to ask too. Since Marking had been a foreman, do you think that, because I wouldn't know this, so is it your job in part to sort of make sure these guys aren't doing anything stupid, or that you're supposed to kind of make sure that they're being safe, at least to some extent?
Absolutely is. Especially in the province that I'm in, the changes to OSHA here very much put the pressure on the field level staff and the field level supervision to ensure that the process is as safe as you can reasonably make it. So, I mean, I've got a couple of pretty young guys that work with me. They're brothers. Neither of them had been told that the hook blades we use for some roofing material, if you ever get them stuck in you, you have to remove them up the wound. You have to return them out the wound track. So, like, we're talking like a lino blade or something similar, where it's got a hook in it. If you put that into your arm or into your leg, if you try to pull it away, you're just going to tear that wound bigger. And a couple of guys in their early 20s, nobody told them that. And the one of them's been doing this 2 years. So, I mean, it's absolutely my job to make sure that they know how to do a bottle check on a propane bottle so that there's not propane leaking onto the roof. It's my job to make sure that they're not, I've had to keep the one brother away from the other brother because one's got a torch going and the other's got a flammable glue that he's working with.
Oh, jeez. Yeah, that's and these guys, are you the one that's supposed to train them, or do they show up supposedly trained already?
That's what the apprenticeship process is. I mean, you go to school for 6 months every year for 4 years as a roofer, and I can have up to 4 apprentices, and it's my job to ensure that I give them the best possible mentorship. I have to teach these young men how to not harm themselves and how not to burn down buildings, frankly.
Hannah.
The problem of people not dealing properly with flammables. I've seen that in an environment that's not even supposed to be a dramatically dangerous environment.
Give me an example after you're done.
Yeah, I worked at a gas station. Like, I've talked about this gas station a lot. I had this manager who used to. She'd have papers that we had to keep track of, and there was this convenient little cubby that there was an item, and then there was a short little 4-inch tall wall around that item, and there was space between the item and the wall, and she would stash those papers in there. And every day I would come in and I'd see these papers in this spot, and I'd say, you realize that storing flammable paper a couple of inches away from the pilot light of the water heater is a bad idea, right? And every day she'd act like I was being a paranoid ninny. And this was like, this place they put stuff in front of the fire door. So you couldn't just get out the fire door. You actually had to, when I had to go out to the shed to get things, I had to step over that stuff to get out there. You're supposed to have 6 feet of empty space in front of your electrical panels. And because we had all kinds of, food stuff and refrigerator stuff, and our electrical panels were, 6 feet tall and 3 feet wide, and they had stored stuff in front of them so that you couldn't even get the panel all the way open. You had to move things to open the panel if there was a fuse that went out. So if there was an electrical fire, there was plenty of flammable stuff right in front of the electrical panels. And there was even a permanent shelf with stuff permanently attached to it that was permanently latched to the wall, like 4 feet away from the electrical panels. That was the way that place was set up. And that kind of thing, all of these fire hazards were at a gas station with tanks full of gasoline under the ground that was across the street from another gas station with tanks full of gas under the ground. And on the opposite corner from us was a third gas station with tanks full of gas under the ground. So if we'd have had a fire and it had gotten out of control, it could have been quite a bit of fun.
Jesus.
And all because one person didn't think it was important to follow the fire safety protocols.
That's fire code.
Overrated.
Marky, you were saying something?
Well, that's fire code. I mean, keeping clear access and egress and ensuring that you can reach, anything that's got gas going into it or electrical going into it. You have to. That's fire code. Like that's a pretty big goddamn deal. I mean,
It is huge.
A business can be deemed uninhabitable for that. I mean.
Well, and what they did, OSHA came in and they fined them. Actually, it wasn't that bad. The fine wasn't. It was like $6,000, which I guess they came in while I was out for the heat injury, and that was when these companies, when you have an injury, they find a way to get rid of you. And what this company tried to do was the never-ending stream of paperwork. Oh, you have to get your back checked out. Why do I have to get my back checked out? I had a heat injury. Oh, you have to get tested to see if you're a diabetic. Why do I have to get tested to see if I'm a diabetic? Why is that your business? Well, that could have caused your heat injury. And they were going to go through, and so I applied for unemployment, and they had me back on the job 24 hours after they approved my unemployment. So apparently all those things, mattered so much that they only mattered until I was going to get unemployment, and then I went back. Mm-hmm. And then of course I got the lecture about, if you see any safety issues, any fire safety issues or anything like that, you should tell us first, because I was the one that went through channels with the company and talked to the manager, then the district manager, then the regional manager about the fire safety violations, and I was the one that filled out the paperwork that went to corporate about the fire safety violations. So they knew I was the one that called OSHA. Needless to say, I was out of there 6 months later.
Yeah.
That's what happens. That's what happens.
Yep.
If you're, and like I said when I described that story about the maintenance sprinkler fitter, I mean, he was a squeaky wheel, and he's blackballed from that industry.
Yeah.
Yeah. And people wonder why the problem of certain types of injuries and certain types of professions never gets solved. Well, it's because if you try to solve that problem, you're the squeaky wheel. You don't get the grease. You get replaced.
You get greased right out the door.
Yeah.
Right out the door, yeah.
And sometimes you hit the pavement before your boots do.
Yep.
Jesus.
I've had that happen in 2 places, both over the safety of people in those places. The other one was at a nursing home, and it was the patient safety and the employee's safety. That was probably where I got my first work-related injury, because I have a herniated disc that we don't know if it was caused by improper lifting at that nursing home or the tow truck for semis that rear-ended the vehicle I was in at 35 miles an hour. Because it could have been either one, but I suspect that I was already, I was probably already on my way to it from that nursing home.
Yeah.
Because they used to, they'd end up half-staffed, they wouldn't bring people in, and they'd violate all kinds of rules and laws, and it was the same situation. You go through channels like you're supposed to, you report to your head nurse, your floor nurse, you report to the head of all the nurses, you report to the home itself's administration, you report to the corporate administration. When there is no other channel to go through, you go to the ombudsman for the elderly. The ombudsman sends staff in and examines the nursing home, and the state takes over the nursing home. And the next thing you know, your life at the nursing home is living hell. But they did fix everything at that nursing home. They took over for months. And I moved on, but it made a big difference. And that same thing is at every job. When it's at a job like at a nursing home, it may not seem like that big of a deal. You know, like for me, I didn't go after them for retaliation because I was only making $4.50 an hour. I could get another $4.50 an hour job at the snap of my fingers. But when you're dealing with a situation where those safety violations cost people's lives and they're retaliating against people for pointing out, hey, this danger is being maintained on this site illegally.
But danger, to fix danger, that costs money.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And instead, they're retaliating against people for saying, hey, problem over here, let's get it fixed so we don't have X problems happen afterwards that are worse than just having this violation. You know, that is a significant deterrent to fixing the problem.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, you know, from my end of it, what you end up with as the person who, you know, it's basically squeals, is that you do get labeled. And I wouldn't have been able to get another job at any other nursing home in the community where I blew the whistle on that one because they knew I was a whistleblower. And I probably couldn't get a job at another, I know I couldn't get a job at another gas station owned by the same corporation that owned the gas station I worked at, or any other business they owned, because I blew the whistle on them and they knew it. And it might even, I probably could be blacklisted at other gas stations in the area, because there are things, you know, that they communicate with each other on. You know, it's Shaman King in chat says snitches get stitches. Well, and when it comes to safety and following regulations that are in place for reasons, snitches get pushed out of the industry.
Yeah. And, you know, while we're on the chat, I actually have a couple of questions from the chat. I don't know if you guys will have the answers to these. Wrong Think Wasian, I'm not really sure if I'm pronouncing it right. He asks, has starting a farming tractor on the ground, have those kinds of accidents been mentioned? I don't know if that's something you guys have any experience with. If not,
I have a little bit.
Yeah.
Well, the two tractors that we had on my grandparents' farm, one of them was a 1949 Ford tractor that had 2 gears, a clutch, and a handbrake. So, I mean, you had to use ether to start it if you were lucky. And if you weren't paying attention, you had forward and reverse, and that was it. There was no other gears. So you weren't paying attention. And the way that those old tractors were designed, I mean, it's a lot like a trike, like the old the trike style off-road equipment.
Yeah.
Where they're very easy to tip, especially if you're pulling a rake or if you're pulling a baler. And I mean, working on the farm, I mean, there's no end of things that can happen. Falling off a hay trailer can be lethal.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
But yeah, I mean, I've got plenty of experience with tractors, and I've got a fair amount of experience with that sort of like skid steer style equipment and forklifts and zoom booms.
Mm-hmm.
If you're not paying attention to shit, you're putting forks into people, you're putting forks into stuff.
Oh, shit.
I mean, well, and it was not a company I worked at, but another roofing company in the city I'm in. They were using a telehandler, a zoom boom, to lift material up to the roof, and there was a bottle that was too close to where they were lifting. The guy operating the equipment couldn't see what was going on. He clipped the bottle fell over, snapped the regulator and hose off, so there was propane jetting onto the roof. And there was another torch running. It lit up. The guys, basically, they all bailed off the roof. It was a structure under construction. It was gone in 30 minutes. And there were bottles going off like bombs.
Holy shit. That's like Final Destination shit. Like just like a series of little events that just
everything went wrong, and then suddenly there's propane bottles exploding.
Yeah, exactly.
And every single one of them would set off the next one.
Yeah, there's a chain reaction of things. That's crazy. Question from Total Utilitarian. I thought I wasn't going to get that one right. Can you ask them if they feel like they have some kind of PTSD from all those experiences? Or maybe if you know anyone that might.
PTSD.
Yeah.
I'll tell you.
If you cheated death, maybe it has some effects.
Well, here's the thing. At some point, I got to the point where I told them, just leave me in the tool room. Leave me fixing the dies. I can only see so many blown up dies. Like every time you heard the bang, and it was a bang, when these dies would break, and you'd hear bang, ding, 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 ding. You'd see them. You could feel the dies break across the floor, and this was a humongous shop, but you would feel it. And every time you break, I was just waiting. I was just waiting for someone to start screaming. I mean, I was lucky that nobody got really. I mean, there was lots of bruises. There was some small bits of dies that kind of poked into you, but nothing like my supervisor. But it was always there. It was always just a button push away, just one lapse of concentration away from some serious damage. I mean, aside from squishing your fingers or cutting them off, but I couldn't do it. I said I was hired for the machine shop, and I don't mind coming to set up these machines, but I'm not doing it. Mm-hmm. At that point, what Hannah was saying, well, they were already laying people off. I thought after 4 years I was good. Nope. I got laid off not too long after that. After I told them I wasn't gonna to work on the press breaks anymore.
Yeah.
No more.
What about you, Mark?
I mean, from the very little I understand about a PTSD diagnosis, I don't think that I have it. But I mean, I don't know why I wouldn't. Maybe I'm just not aware of the tics and the reactions that a person might have.
Yeah.
I mean, I've as a scaffolder and as a roofer, I've had when we've been craning stuff to work areas, I've had the ball of the crane and the load in question. I can't even count the number of times where I've basically just instinctively somehow known to move, and suddenly I've got something flying by my head, something that if it wouldn't take my head clear off, it would have messed me up pretty bad. Mm-hmm. I don't think I have PTSD, but I've not talked to a psychiatrist or psychologist to see if I do.
Yeah. I mean, it's you think a lot of guys just say, well, this is the job, and then they just go on with it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so
PTSD is basically just a normal human function crossing the line between a functional application of human instinct and human learning to where it interferes with your life, and where it becomes not just harmful to you but hard to live with. Because it's basically learning from experience and reacting to that and developing a higher degree of awareness and a sort of a closer connection to things that have happened, specific things that have happened to you, than to all of the other things that have happened to you. If you really want to boil it down and take all of the various details out of it that we understand as the pain and suffering of it, it's basically... It's like, in a way, it's like having extreme allergies, food allergies that almost kill you when you eat the wrong food. It's your self-preservation system getting beyond control. So everybody has that direction of learning from stuff like this. Like you talked about, knowing something that tells you to move when the wrecking ball is coming your way. It's something that you're observing that you may not be consciously paying attention to, or it's something that you may not even be consciously aware you've observed it, but just like your instinct can jump at that black dog shadow, or like I thought that would see the person walking across the highway and go, that can't be right. It's you have that instinct, and it's, I would say that probably most people who are in jobs like this, most people who are involved in dangerous jobs where they have seen people killed or maimed or seriously injured, or injured in a way where they suffer terribly even if they're going to recover, they've probably got some degree of this. And it doesn't matter whether it's diagnosable as PTSD or not. It's on the same spectrum. I like this. We have Zeranx said, it's called Spidey Sense, Hannah. You'd think you would know this. Well, yeah. Everybody has their own degree of Spidey Sense, and this kind of stuff increases your Spidey Sense. When your Spidey Sense gets out of control, you have PTSD.
Mm-hmm. One other thing I wanted to say, too, some of what we've been talking about are basically accidents that are immediate, that have immediate consequences, injury or death, or at least a near-death experience. But that's not the only risk that happens. I remember before the call started, I think you guys were talking about other things that take longer, like maybe you're working around something for a long time, and just like being exposed to a chemical or a gas or something is making you sick over time. So what are some of those kinds of risks at the jobs that you guys have had? I'll let Mark go first if you know any.
Just having worked in that fertilizer plant, you're inhaling fertilizer, and phosphorus poison or phosphate poisoning is a thing. Mm-hmm. It causes severe heart problems. And as a roofer, you're inhaling asphalt smoke and smoke from modified bitumen membranes and off-gassing from propane and insulation. God forbid, I worked on a pulp mill where the siding was made of asbestos, and we were told not to fuck with it. If you do rubber roofing or PVC, TPO, and EPDM roofing, the cleaners and the primer agents, they all contain toluene, which absorbs right through the skin and goes right to your liver. And when I started roofing, nobody told me that you were supposed to wear rubber gloves for that. So I've spent some portion of 15 years cleaning rubber and TPO and PVC with a rag in my bare hands in this cleaner. Basically, it's got white gas in it, like camping gas. This shit's not healthy for you. And I've seen no end of guys that, they develop black lung or emphysema or respiratory issues because of exposure to asphalt and all of the other stuff that goes with it.
Varsol in machine shops. Varsol, you got big Varsol tanks. Varsol is fantastic for cleaning coolant and oil off metal. It is fantastic. But it is horrible for your skin. It absorbs into everything. It absorbs into your skin. So it doesn't matter. You have to scrub because it'll get in your food. It'll get in your eyes. It'll get into everything. But you always see it. You always see Varsol in every machine shop. There was this stuff at this repair shop that I work at. It was supposed to be a green biodegradable cleaner. It was worse. It was absolutely worse than the Varsol. It was horrible. It hurt. It hurt. You'd wear your gloves, but again, it would splash out, and it never really caused any burns for me, but you could feel it because once you'd clean it off, your hands they were cracked, they were dry, they were sore, and this stuff just absorbed. Varsol.
Well, I have a material data sheet for Varsol here. And it says, okay, health hazard minimal, no significant risk. Flammability hazard is moderate. Material which must be
No significant risk.
is what they say for the MSDS. But they do recommend safety glasses, gloves, and a vapor respirator. But it's minimal anyway. Somehow it's both of those things at once.
Yeah, I mean, if you want another good example from roofing, there's also coal tar pitch, which is it's a coal-based asphalt, and it's got barbed fibers that are fairly similar to they're microfibers, similar to how fiberglass or asbestos is shaped.
Mm-hmm.
If it gets into your eyes and it causes massive ocular irritation. God forbid you sweat; it gets worse, and it can actually lead to light sensitivity. It also is horrendous in your lungs.
Oh yeah, I bet that all sounds just awful. And we have stuff for it, but like they have safety equipment. But go ahead, Mark.
The one and only time I ever tore off a coal tar pitch roof, somebody had the bright idea to put OSB sheeting, so oriented strand board sheeting, 3/4 inch wood sheet down across this entire roof, and then use marine fiberglass over top to try and reseal this roof. So they screwed this wood down with 6-inch deck screws and then fiberglassed it. And then it was on top of coal tar pitch, which is already shitty to work with. And so we had to cut it up into chunks, and we were using, it's called a Polish plow. Don't get mad at me. I don't know why it's called that, but it's basically, it's a pry bar on wheels. And this was immediately after we'd just hired 2 guys to this crew who were both Eastern German and spoke very little English. And they understood how to roof. They were both very good roofers. Yeah. One of the guys had this lever underneath one end, and I made the mistake of putting my foot under part of it so he could shift where his point of contact was. And the roof deck underneath had rotted out, so the roof decking came out, and he almost lost this Polish plow. And because you've got a piece of fiberglass covered wood under load from him prying up on it, it snapped down. What I didn't realize was there was a 6-inch deck screw directly above my foot, went in right behind the steel toe.
Oh.
Immediately beside a hole in the roof.
Mm-hmm.
Neither one of the 2 guys closest to me, both Germans, understood why I was screaming. There was a clear language barrier. But the only German I spoke at that point was how to tell them to fuck off. So I had to reach down, grab this sheet, and pull it up so that the screw exited my foot.
Oh man.
Oh, pulling nail out of your foot hurts.
Yeah.
Oh,
that
geez.
sucks.
Yeah,
I'm lucky that way.
And that job, I mean, I ended up losing not just 2 days to that. I was back to work less than 2 days later. That job, that coal tar pitch, I had to go down repeatedly while we were ripping this membrane up to wash my eyes out because I was in such, like I wear glasses, I have to drive. I was in such intense pain from the fibers in my eyes and from the sweat that I literally could not see, and I was disoriented, which is a really bad idea when you're 2 stories up.
Mm-hmm. No, for sure. Oh, Hannah, go ahead.
You mentioned stuff in your eyes, and I wanted to point out shops where they mold metal, where they have to they pull it out of the mold and then they have to smooth it down because it's a part in a machine that has to be a moving part and it has to be able to function without scraping up the rest of the machine. One of the common injuries that they have a rough time getting people to use the proper equipment until they get that injury is getting a metal particle in their eye. It is not necessarily easy to get that out. You're really lucky if when you flush it, it comes out. When you flush it with water. If it doesn't, then you can be looking at surgery on your eye.
Yep. And
or being stuck with it in there forever because they can't get it out.
And something else that would go with that, and also, I mean, Brian mentioned welders earlier. I mean, flash injuries, ocular flash injuries.
Burns, the burns.
Yep. I mean, imagine being in a forge and there's molten metal splashing around. Well, when that stuff hits the ground and sparks, it produces a lot of light.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it's definitely something to think about. And I we're getting to about an hour and 45 minutes, so I gotta wrap it up soon. But I wanted to just to bring out a little bit of perspective. I have this like list of the most dangerous jobs. It starts on the really really soft end with teacher, which is the least of this list, in 13th place. But where roofers are the sixth most dangerous job in the world, apparently. This is according to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, so maybe it only applies to like the states. But I'm guessing that in Canada it's probably comparable.
Pretty similar.
Yeah. So roofers at 25.2 per 100,000. This is a fatal injury rate. So these are deaths for the most part. And then above that there are farmers and ranchers at 26 out of 100,000. Garbage collectors at 35.8, so about 36. Pilots at 63. Fishers at 80. And then the most dangerous, and what do you think the most dangerous job is in America? Is logging. Yes, lumberjacks. Mm-hmm. So I have this little short article that I want to read about a logger who is talking about his experience doing his job. And this is how it goes. Okay. There's no telling how many times Bill Turney had cheated death in the 54 years he worked in the timber industry. But last June, at age 70, he finally lost out. He was cutting a large tree. So the guy was working until he was 70. He was cutting a large tree in Johnston County, Arkansas, and as it fell, it hit another tree and it struck him. Turney is one of many logging fatalities in the industry that occurs every year. In 2010, deaths among loggers increased from 59 to 36, from 36 in 2000. So in 2009, it was 36 deaths. In 2010, it was 59 deaths. The Bureau of Labor Statistics reports this. One of the biggest dangers is that the logger cannot see broken tops of trees or limbs hidden by live branches, said Dana Hinckley, founder of Logger Rescue, which trains workers in safety and rescue techniques. The broken tops that snagged in the canopy are called widowmakers for their tendency to work loose and fall on the heads of lumbermen. Violent storms can raise the risk by twisting these trees, and special saw techniques are required to release some of that tension before the final cuts can be safely made. The macho culture of the logging industry makes safety training difficult, however. They think they know how to cut trees because Grandpa taught them how to do it, said Hinckley. That good old boy attitude keeps them from training. Logging is safer now than in the past, though, thanks to safer equipment, according to Guy Friogi, a safety manager for Seaway Timber in Massena, New York. We use a feller buncher to cut down most trees, he said. It's on tracks and operators are enclosed in a cab, keeping them isolated from danger. That protects loggers most of the time, but where a stand of trees is too thick, they have to revert to the old-fashioned method, which is using a chainsaw. Dana sounds like a woman, but it's a man that started the program. So, or he works at this safety initiative, which I'm glad for. Although I mean, would you guys agree with the macho culture thing? In terms
blogging?
Of no, and just in doing dangerous jobs in general, and what you guys know anyway.
See, I don't know. No, I don't know.
Okay.
Maybe. I mean, I especially in construction. I haven't done a whole lot of construction, but I'm friends with quite a few journeyman carpenters, and they're just full of beefy, beer-filled testosterone. You know?
Right.
They're meatheads, but they're good guys.
Well, this is I mean, yeah, like it's work like this though that it's usually often is better suited for these people. In fact, you were talking about marking with some convicts, and a lot of times, if you've been in prison and you're on the other side and you're trying to find something to do, and you may not be very well educated, and you were an ex-con, which makes it very difficult to get work. Sometimes you have to do labor, construction, things like that. It's all you can get. So, and I'm all for people
good
trying
money for somebody that's been on the inside.
Yeah.
And then you all also have the situation where there are people who are ordered to get jobs or ordered to get better jobs because they owe money to their ex-wives for child support or alimony. And I've seen a few men take more dangerous jobs than they would have chosen on their own in order to make money that a judge says they have to make in order to pay a higher amount of child support or a higher amount of alimony.
I got a weird kind of off-topic story, or at least I don't know how accurate I'm going to retell this. It's Hank Williams III apparently is some kind of metal singer, unlike his father and his grandfather. And apparently he's had a few kids out of wedlock. And at some point a judge told him, supposedly, that you come from one of the preeminent country music families. Go record a goddamn country album and pay your back child support.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that doesn't surprise me at all. It really doesn't surprise me at all, because I've even in my own family, my husband was told that he should be making $60 an hour, as he's got a massage therapy degree. Well, he's in an area that profession is saturated here. He could probably make money like that if he moved somewhere where massage therapists are not a dime a dozen. But to just say, "Oh, go out and do this, and you will make the money," is bullshit. And it's that way in any profession. It's that way in any situation. But yeah, you see men in that situation where they don't have somebody supporting them. They don't have somebody backing them. It's them and the judge. They can't afford a lawyer. They have no choice but to find a way to meet the judge's demand if they are not going to go to jail. If they don't meet the judge's demand, they get locked up. So they go and they do jobs like this, that are not necessarily jobs that they would have otherwise chosen.
Well, that's an interesting point. When I was in court for custody and the whole process, one of the points that she made was that my trade, there is a lot of layoffs. There's always layoffs. And she said, well, maybe you should get other work so that you can pay me more child support. And I told them, no. I said, no, This is what I do. This is what I want to do. And I'm going to teach my daughter to do exactly what she wants to do. To do what she wants to do and do it because you love it, not because of the money.
Yeah.
I still didn't get custody, but I have access. But the judge and the lawyers, they kind of looked at her, and it was strange because I guess the more they talked to her, they realized that I was a little more sane. But it was that comment right there that I thought, well, this never mattered. This never mattered when up until the time that we were in court. How much money or when I got money, how much money, it didn't make any difference. The moment we went to court, it was money. And even now, 7 years later, money, and more money. But I should get other work because she needs more money.
Yeah.
And it never occurs to them that they could get other work. Like my husband's ex was earning $40K a year when they divorced. And she quit to be a stay-at-home mom and asked for more child support. And the judge didn't look at her and say, why did you quit a $40,000 a year job? No. He looked at my husband and said, why aren't you earning more money so that she doesn't have to work?
Well, last year was the first year she worked since she left with her new boyfriend. That was the first time she worked in 7 years. It was nice supporting her, I guess, but yeah, I don't know. I don't really care what they say.
Yeah.
I just don't understand the process, right? So I don't pay. You're going to take away my car, take away my license, and then what? I don't understand. How am I going to pay the money if I don't work? How am I going to get to work if I don't have a car? How do I get a car and no license? I don't understand.
Right.
I understand the problem.
And all these details go into shoehorning a lot of guys into circumstances they wouldn't otherwise choose. There are men that are doing this to avoid being homeless. That they're taking jobs as trash collectors and risking. When I was a kid, my hometown lost a trash collector to the truck. And it was a very rare thing for a person to end up in the truck and have the crusher crush him. But that happened. My mom was on our city council at the time, and she went nuts over that. Not like lost her mind over it, but she was digging into everything. Why did this happen? What should have been in place that, and everything. But one of the really tragic things is when you find out people go into these jobs unwillingly. Like, this isn't exactly a job. Nobody dreams of becoming a trash collector when they grow up. It's a highly respectable job. Everybody ought to respect the hell out of that job because it's dangerous and dirty and stinky and nasty, and the people that do it have to be some of the toughest people. But it's almost a guarantee that the guy that got killed like that got killed doing a job that he was doing because he needed the income, or because he couldn't get another job because of something in his background, or because he owed somebody a child support obligation and was told, do this or you're going to go to jail.
Right. They have responsibilities and obligations. But we have to cut this off because we've gone for a while. Oh, you want to? Yeah.
I just want to finish up with one thing.
Go ahead.
You picked a good day for this because this is Workers' Memorial Day.
Oh, it is. Oh, good. I didn't know. I could pretend as though I knew that and that was the plan all along, but it's too late for me to do that now. So I'm going to totally be honest and say I didn't know how fortunate a circumstance this must be. But no, it's great. I'm glad there is one. I didn't even know that. So. Wow, that's great. Thanks for telling me that.
Serendipity, my friend.
Yes, exactly. Some things are just meant to be, and Honey Badger Radio, whether it knows it or not, probably not in this case. Okay, so we're going to wrap up the show, but continue the conversation in the after show. Marking, Nick, can you guys stick around for the after show?
Yeah.
I have to take off for 10 minutes to go pick the woman and little guy up at her parents', but if you're still on in 10, 15 minutes, I'll leave my thing on.
Yeah, that's fine. Just come back. We'll do it after the show. We usually go for about a half an hour. So.
All right. Well, yeah. Then I'll leave my thing on, and I'll take off right now, and I'll be back in like 10 minutes.
All right. Thanks for coming on. Or we'll see you in a bit. Okay. And for you guys that are watching, I want to thank you guys for joining us for the show, especially you folks at the CIA who are listening in. And I want to thank Hannah for coming on with me so that I'm not alone, and Marking, as well as Nick, for being our esteemed guests that can tell us about their experiences. And yeah, I want to thank you guys for taking the time to join us on this week's Pussycat Cast. We will talk to those of you who are going to be joining us for the after show very soon. If you guys want to be a part of the after show, become a patron at www.patreon.com/honeybadgerradio. You'll get access to watch the after shows, and if you are enough of a patron, you'll be able to join the after shows. So, thanks for coming on, and one shout out. We got a super chat here from George Jewett. I'm going to assume that that's his real name and not a joke. And he writes, such an important conversation needs to occur. Thanks, guys. Good night from England. So thank you, George, for the 10 pounds you sent. I think that's like $50 American or something. I don't know. No, I do know the pound is worth more than $1 right now, but
yeah, that it is.
That's 4,000 Canadian, I think.
Yeah, that's
us and our monopoly money.
Yeah, right. Okay, so we'll talk to you guys in the next time we do a stream like this, and thanks for joining us on the Pussycat.